He thought his life had no meaning anymore until he found a girl crying on the street. Michael was tired of his lifeless routine. After years of loneliness and regret, he believed that nothing could change. But on an ordinary day, everything turned upside down. An unexpected choice upon finding a lost girl. A past he had tried to forget suddenly resurfaces. Michael woke up at the same time every day. The bedside clock beeped at 6 in the morning, and he reached out to turn it off without thinking. He was used to that routine. It was as if time had stopped since Sarah, his ex-wife, left his life 7 years ago. The empty bed beside him was a constant reminder of the emptiness he carried inside. Michael's life was nothing more than a distant echo of days gone by, leaving nothing new behind. Getting up, he followed the same ritual as always. Make coffee, sit at the kitchen table, drink it in silence, and look out the window. The sky was overcast, matching his mood perfectly. He no longer thought much about how he had gotten there, how his life had become a series of identical mornings. There was a quiet sadness in every movement, a resignation in accepting life as it was. Michael picked up the newspaper more out of habit than interest. He didn't read the news, just flipped through the pages. When he was married to Sarah, they used to discuss world events over breakfast. He remembered the laughter, the little teasing. It was strange to think of how something so simple now seemed like a distant memory, almost as if it belonged to someone else. After finishing his coffee, he put on the worn suit he used for work. He glanced at himself in the mirror briefly but didn't linger. The reflection he saw was that of a man who had given up on trying to find excitement in his life. He had worked at the same insurance agency for over a decade. It wasn't a bad job, but it wasn't something that excited him either. Deep down, he knew the job only existed to keep the bills paid and his mind occupied, preventing him from thinking too much about his loneliness. That particular morning, as he walked to the bus stop, something different happened. In the distance, he saw a little girl standing on the sidewalk, alone. She was crying. Michael tried to ignore her, his gaze fixed on the approaching bus, but something made him stop. He felt a restlessness in his chest, a feeling that he couldn't just move on. The girl had curly blonde hair, now wet from the light drizzle, and her eyes were red from crying. He hesitated for a moment. If he stopped, he would miss the bus. But for the first time in years, that routine didn't seem so important. "Hey, are you okay?" Michael knelt down beside her, feeling a strange mix of nervousness and compassion. He didn't know how to deal with children, let alone one who was crying in the middle of the street. The girl looked up and sniffled. "I got lost," she said, her voice trembling. Michael felt a pang in his heart. He looked around, searching for an adult who might be responsible for her, but there was no one. The bus went by, but he didn't care anymore. "What's your name?" he asked gently. "Lily," the girl replied, wiping away her tears with her little hand. Michael took a deep breath. Something inside him changed at that moment. He knew he couldn't just leave her there. "Don't worry, Lily. I'll help you find your way home. Do you remember where you live?" Lily nodded, still uncertain, but she seemed to trust him. And then, for the first time in a long time, Michael felt that something in his life was about to change. He walked alongside Lily through the city streets. The girl guided him, vaguely pointing out directions. Despite her uncertain answers, Michael didn't feel frustrated. There was something calming about her company, something that made him feel like he was finally moving in a different direction from his usual routine. "Do you remember how long you've been lost, Lily?" he asked, trying to keep the conversation light but concerned for her safety. "I don't know. I think it was just a little while," she replied, her voice hesitant. She glanced at him sideways, as if trying to gauge if she could fully trust him. Michael smiled, trying to reassure her. "Well, it doesn't matter. Now we'll find your home. I bet your mom is worried." The silence that followed was unsettling. Michael looked at her out of the corner of his eye and noticed that she was gripping his hand more tightly. Something about that made him uneasy. He remembered when he and Sarah used to talk about having children. She always wanted to be a mother, but Michael never felt ready to take on that responsibility. Now, holding Lily's hand, he wondered if he had made an irreparable mistake in pushing Sarah and the possibility of a family away. As they walked, they passed a park where children played happily. Michael paused for a moment, remembering the days when he and Sarah would walk through places like this. She would look at the running children and smile with a gleam in her eyes. He used to say he wasn't ready, that they had time, but perhaps at that moment he was simply afraid. "Do you like parks?" Michael asked, trying to distract himself from his own thoughts. Lily nodded. "Yes. My mom takes me sometimes." She stopped talking abruptly, as if she was thinking about something she didn't want to share. "Your mom must be really nice," he said, trying to keep the conversation flowing naturally. The girl shrugged and pointed to a street ahead. "I think it's over there." Michael looked up at the overcast sky. A light drizzle was still falling on them, and he felt the chill seep into his bones. Somehow, that morning wasn't just about finding Lily's home. He felt that something bigger was about to happen, but he still couldn't understand what it was. Finally, they arrived in front of a modest house with a white fence and a small garden full of colorful flowers. Lily looked up at him and gave a shy smile. "I live here." Michael looked at the house and felt a strange familiarity, but he didn't know why. He knelt in front of Lily, smiling to reassure her. "Let's see if your mom is home." He rang the doorbell, his heart beating faster than he expected. Something big was about to happen. He could feel it. The door slowly opened, and the face that appeared in front of Michael made him freeze. Sarah, his ex-wife. She looked as surprised as he was, her eyes wide, not knowing how to react. "Michael," her voice was a whisper, almost as if she couldn't believe he was there, at her doorstep, with Lily by his side. He swallowed hard, barely able to form the words. "Sarah, what are you doing here?" Sarah looked at the girl beside him and stepped forward, kneeling next to Lily. "Are you okay, dear?" she asked, her voice now soft and caring. Lily nodded and threw herself into Sarah's arms, a gesture so natural that Michael felt a sharp pain in his chest. Something was wrong, terribly wrong. Sarah stood up, holding Lily's hand, and looked at Michael. "What are you doing here?" she asked, her voice now a bit firmer but still hesitant. Michael took a step back, feeling lost. "I found Lily lost on the street. She said she lived here, so I brought her back." He looked at Lily, then at Sarah, and felt a growing weight in his chest. 7 years. Lily was 7 years old, exactly the time that he and Sarah had been separated. Michael's mind raced. He tried to push the thought away, but the more he looked at Lily, the more the idea became impossible to ignore. He looked at Sarah, who now looked away, as if she knew what was about to happen. "Sarah," he began, his voice trembling. Is Lily my daughter?" Sarah closed her eyes for a moment, taking a deep breath before opening them again. They were full of tears. "Yes, Michael. Lily is your daughter." Sarah's words hung in the air like a bomb about to explode. Michael stood there, motionless, unsure of what to do or how to react. He felt the ground vanish beneath his feet. It was as if the world was spinning around him, and he was trapped in the middle of the storm. "My daughter," he repeated, almost as if he needed to hear it again to believe it. Sarah nodded, tears streaming down her face. "I found out I was pregnant right after we separated, Michael. I tried to tell you." Her voice broke. "But you didn't want kids, you made that clear. I thought it would be easier this way, easier to move on if you didn't know." Michael shook his head, incredulous. "You thought it would be easier?" His voice came out louder than he intended, full of pain and confusion. "You kept me out of her life, Sarah. 7 years. I lost everything." Sarah wiped her tears with the back of her hand, trying to regain her composure. "I know. And there isn't a day that I don't regret not telling you sooner. But at the time, it seemed like the only choice. I didn't want you to feel trapped in a life you didn't want." Michael looked at Lily, who was now distracted, playing with a doll she had pulled out of her backpack. 7 years. 7 years of a life he had missed, not even knowing she existed. He had missed her first steps, her first words, moments that would never come back. And now, his voice came out weak, almost without strength. "What do I do now, Sarah?" Sarah looked at him with a mix of sadness and understanding. "Now, Michael, that's up to you. I didn't exclude you out of malice. I did what I thought was right at the time. But now that you know, you have the choice to be present. Lily doesn't know who you are. It will take time for her to get to know you. Michael swallowed hard, feeling a lump in his throat. He looked at Lily again, who was looking back at him with curiosity but without knowing who he really was. I want to get to know her, he said, with a determination he hadn't felt in years. I want to be a part of her life, Sarah. Sarah slowly nodded. We can take it slowly. Let things flow naturally. But, Michael, I only ask one thing. Don't hurt her. If you're going to be part of her life, you need to be committed. Michael looked at Sarah and then at Lily. He knew the road ahead wouldn't be easy, but for the first time in a long time, he felt like he had something worth fighting for. I promise, he replied, his heart filled with conflicting emotions. I won't fail her. That same week, Michael had the opportunity to spend more time with Lily. He was nervous. So many thoughts were racing through his mind. He didn't know how to act, what to say, how to approach her. After all, to Lily, he was a stranger. They went to the park, a place he knew kids liked, but Lily was quiet, almost introspective. She played on the swing, but she didn't ask for help to push. Michael watched, trying to find a way to connect with her. Are you having fun? He asked, sitting on the bench next to the swing. Lily shrugged but didn't push him away. I like the swing, she said with a shy smile. Michael took a deep breath. At least she had responded. When I was little, I used to bet with my friends who could swing the highest. I bet you can swing higher than I ever could. Lily looked at him for a moment and gave a shy smile. I doubt it, she replied, with a twinkle in her eye. Michael laughed, feeling his nervousness begin to fade. Want to bet, he teased, giving her a gentle push on the swing. With each push, Lily's smile grew, and Michael felt something change between them. It was subtle, but it was there. A connection that was starting to form. That night, when he returned home, Michael reflected on the day. He knew there was still a long way to go, but for the first time in a long time, he felt that there was hope. He was willing to do whatever it took to be the father Lily deserved. The following weekend, Michael and Lily spent more time together. Each meeting seemed to bring them a little closer. They went to the zoo, the movies, and Michael even began helping her with her homework. Sarah was always nearby, watching from a distance, still cautious but pleased with the progress. One day, after yet another outing at the park, Michael knelt down in front of Lily and looked into her eyes. I know it took me a long time to get here, he said, his voice gentle but full of emotion. But I'm very happy to be here now, being a part of your life. I know I'll never be able to make up for the lost time, but I want to be the best dad I can be from now on. Lily looked at him for a moment, her big, innocent eyes saying nothing. Michael felt his heart race, unsure of what she would say. But then, to his surprise, Lily stepped forward and hugged him. It was a timid hug, but full of meaning. Michael stood still for a moment, feeling tears well up in his eyes. He had spent so much time lost, living a life of routine and sadness. But now, with Lily in his arms, he finally felt like he was on the right path. Finally, he was home,